I want to just briefly touch on this because, again, I want to make sure that you're not misrepresented around the issue of racism.
Mm-hmm.
I know when we were talking earlier, you said, no, I've seen racism in my work and so forth. This is a real thing, right? But you take issue with this sort of ideological racism, the sort of for lack of a better, the Ibrahim Kendi version of our explanation of how that actually works. So tell me a little bit about that.
Of course there's racism in America, and if you've worked as I have in the criminal court system, you see it very up close sometimes. But you don't have to have any specialized field of knowledge to see racism or sexism or homophobia or anti-Semitism. We've seen a huge amount of anti-Asian violence in New York City. That's been really horrifying recently in the last year or so. There's a lot of bad people who do bad things. And I'm not playing it down by using simple language. I'm just saying that there is, that's all real. How we remedy it, how we teach about it, how we talk about it, how we understand it, reasonable people can have different ideas about it. I disagree with the book White Fragility that says all white people are racist. I disagree with Ibram Kendi's notion that the way you remedy past discrimination is with present discrimination. I think reasonable people could sit down and say, here's why I think that's unworkable or that's a bad idea. And it's part of what I was saying earlier. Part of what I wrote the op-ed about is you may think the person's racist because they don't agree with Ibram Kendi or because they don't accept your point of view, but that's not how you have a conversation with people. You have to bring your ideas, you have to bring your explanations, your examples. You have to bring that to the table to have a conversation. You either agree with me or you're racist is a ridiculous position to have.
You're just reminding me, some of the more amazing stories I've read involve, a man, I forget his name right now, who would go to actual white supremacists.
Daryl Davis.
Yeah, Daryl Davis.
Yes.
Make friends with them and actually shift a number of their thinking. It's
through conversation and treating people like human beings.
And this is like people who are actual.
Right. Daryl Davis is a black man, and he was speaking to Ku Klux Klan members. He and I are on a newly formed organization called FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and it's a collection of some rather amazing people that I'm very thrilled to be included with, because there are people trying to talk about how to have the conversations we need to have and how to treat each other like human beings.
Something you just mentioned, I want to build on that a little bit. It's the speaking up when you see wrong being done. As we're filming, there's a video today of a woman pulling down what she describes as pornographic advertising in the subway. There's in Fairfax County, there's parents looking up books. Again, this pornography element is sort of coming up, sort of grade 7 and 8 books. People are seeing these kinds of things, but in many cases they don't know how to necessarily respond, even though they have an issue with it. Same with, for example, masking of children. That's another topic which some people are talking about. But you're saying you got to speak out.
Well, yes, and I think one of the biggest problems that we have, and certainly what my own journey has sort of shown us, is around certain topics there's this huge cost to speaking out, and so people remain quiet. And I saw that video of the woman pulling things down in the subway, and I've seen more than one Fairfax County, Virginia school board meeting at this point, because there are a lot of parents there speaking up and saying what's going on in our schools is not acceptable, it's not good, it's bad for our kids. That should never carry a cost. You should be able to show up at a school board meeting and say, I'm really concerned about this practice going on in my school. I want to speak to board members and elected leaders who are responsive to me, right? The idea, these parents show up, and sometimes the Fairfax County, I'm in New York, I'm not in Virginia, but we've seen in San Francisco and Virginia, board members get up and walk out of the room. That's not your job or your role, and it's just not acceptable. You're there to listen to parents and to be responsive to parents, right? You have, doesn't mean that every parent that comes in and has an issue or has a concern gets to change what's going on in the school on the spot. That's not how it works. But the conversation about what's important and what's happening has to be engaged. Parents have to be listened to. So when the criticism cuts too close to the bone and people don't like it, getting up and walking out of the room is not acceptable. So I ran a school board for a period of time, so I can say it's really possible to sit there and listen to people who strongly disagree with you and make a space where people who agree and disagree with you can come and be heard.
I remember back when there was a lot of discussion about people were talking about doing homeschooling in the COVID era. Many schools were shut down. And this Harvard professor said basically that we shouldn't be allowing for this. I don't remember that because we can't really control what these kids are learning. So it just made me really think about that. It never occurred to me that school administrators might think that they should overrule the parent's role potentially, right? Yeah. Because in the end, I guess you would expect the parents would be in charge, but that's not actually everybody's view, right?
That's a very, very big issue right now, and I think we're going to see it grow bigger. That discussion is going to become more engaged because there is this idea that sometimes parents are part of the problem. You see it around things like kids choosing different pronouns in school, and a lot of schools have started this process where they say okay, we're not going to tell the parents that we're now calling this girl who came to our school as a girl who's now wishing to use male pronouns that we're using male pronouns, or vice versa. There's no excuse for that. There's just no excuse if there's some particular reason to believe that a child's in danger from their parents. Teachers are mandatory reporters. You have to report that danger. If there isn't any real or concrete reason to think that parents couldn't be engaged about the well-being of their child, then there's no excuse not to. Of course parents have to be engaged about what's going on with their children, and of course parents have the last say in what's going on for their children, but this notion that somehow schools know better or that they can do a better job than parents is creeping up. Not exclusive to gender ideology, but you see it most troublingly there, and it is it's part of a broader pattern of thinking about schools not as places where you have to educate future citizens and prepare them for college or prepare them for the workforce, but where you're molding a person to share an ideological point of view. And I think it really gets off the rails of what schools are supposed to be doing, particularly because schools aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing in the first place, which is to educate future citizens. When you're falling down on that job, and then you say, well, we're not even really so much focused on that, we're focused on making sure that children agree with an ideological point of view. It's deeply troubling, and it's one of those things that I think parents on both sides of a political aisle could agree about.